Sharon, quote, Betty, unquote, Preszler was handpicked as one member of the initial cadre of women fighter pilots in the United States Air Force. All right, Air Force. Yes, indeed. She was the first woman to fly the F-16, a single-seat, single-engine fighter. The first woman to fly combat missions and instruct in the F-16. Betty has over 1,300 hours in the F-16, including over 15 combat hours in Iraq and 1 ejection due to electrical failure. In her 20-plus years of service in the U.S. Air Force, she was also a navigator, piloted a Lear jet, and spent time in North American Aerospace Defense Command writing our homeland defense plans after terrorist attacks on 9/11. The plans are still in use today. All right. After retiring from the Air Force, Betty went to work for Southwest Airlines, where she has flown over 8,000 hours in a Boeing 737. When she isn't flying, Betty is traveling or scuba diving with her husband and son, volunteering at a local animal shelter, or hanging out at home with her 2 dogs. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Reading Circle microphones, Sharon Betty Preszler. Sharon, good morning.
Good morning, Mark.
Thank you so much. As we said before going on the air, thank you so much for rising early to join me. But at the same time, I do know for those of us who have served, early morning does not bother us per se. So
no, we spend a lot of time up in the dark.
Yeah, we really do. That is true. Each time I talk to one of you all from the military, from the Air Force, it brings back memories of basic training in school and everything else. And it really, we did not have any particular hours. I don't think there was any such thing as, early morning, late night. It was kind of like whenever you had to get the job done, you got it done. So
that's the truth.
Yeah, it is. So so if I get giddy this morning, now listening audience, I'm gonna put the disclaimer out there now, and if you've been listening to me any amount of time, anytime I have anybody on the air who is in aviation, I'm super excited in general, but I take it up to another level, to like an exponential, excited to the second, third, and fourth, and fifth power, because I just get excited just thinking about someone who commands something like an F-16. And since I'm familiar with the aircraft, whether it was working on them for those times that I was in there in terms as a jet engine mechanic or either flying on the flight simulator or what have you, I am just always in awe of people who do that for real. And so when I get an opportunity to talk to somebody or interview somebody or question them, I just get giddy, like goosebumps. But that's the way it is kind of like for me right now. I'm glad this is radio and not TV. But in any event, again, would you rather be called Sharon, Betty, or which?
Either way, now that I've been retired 13 years, I'm Sharon more often than I'm Betty, but okay. I'm not pretty either.
No, I like whichever way folks like. That's the way I like it. So if Sharon works for you, that would, because was Betty like your call name, or that was your nickname?
Yeah.
Or Betty was your call name?
Sign.
Okay, yeah. That was your call sign. All right. Now, so we're going to kind of take this back to the beginning in terms of, all right, when you were a little girl, did you say at that point, I'm going to be a pilot one day, or did this evolve after certain events or what have you?
No, it was, I was probably 4 years old. Excuse me, I was, got on my first airplane ride to go to England with my mom and sister. My mom was from England, and they let us, back then, this is, the late 60s.
Right.
You could go up into the flight deck.
Correct.
So we were crossing the Atlantic Ocean. It was a moonless night, and the stewardesses took my sister and I up front, and the sky was absolutely amazing. There were so many stars. I couldn't believe how beautiful it was. I was just totally thrilled by my first flight in an airplane, so I went back to my seat and told my mom I wanted to be a stewardess. And she stopped for a minute. She said, "Oh, that's nice, honey. What do you think you might not want to be a pilot?" And
wow,
I didn't even. And I said, "Well, what's the pilot do?" "Well, those are those men up front flying the airplane." And I went, "Oh yeah, that's what I want to do." And so from then on, it was what I wanted.
And I'm sitting there saying, wow, because first off, your mother had the foresight and the insight, because that was during a time when women were not doing that, or at least not many. I know we had the Bessie Colemans and the Amelia Earharts, and, we had the historical figures, but that wasn't something women were doing on a regular.
Oh, no. And it's one of those things why, as a little girl, you look around, and I didn't even think about being a pilot, because those were the men up front, and the women were in the back, handing out drinks and snacks, and that's what I envisioned my role on an airplane would be. But no, my mom said, put that little bug in my ear, and that's what I wanted to do from then on.
Well, I tell you what, kudos to her. Good for her, because again, that was some foresight of, and this, you're the first in the series this month in March, because I really do like themes. I try to be thematic. And this is Women's History Month. So that's why I was thrilled whenever I got all the emails back from all of you in Athena's voice that said, yeah, we'd love to do the interview. I was like, great, I'm going to set up March around you all as for Women's History Month. And yeah. So that's why for me, for that time frame, for your mom to say dream to be that instead of that. In other words, she was going out of the stereotypical, which was been the flight attendants, or at that time called stewardesses.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely. It was and then you'd tell people that when you were a little girl, and they would say, oh, that's nice. That's never going to happen kind of attitude.
Right. You say, oh, so then given that, now the bug is in your ear and you kind of like, okay, what did you do? What was kind of like the process in terms of schooling? Or as you said, now I'm telling people this is what I want to be. And they're like, oh, that's nice. But you didn't get deterred.
No, I think I'm naturally relatively, I don't know. I like to say determined because it sounds nicer than stubborn person. But, it was just kind of what I wanted to do for the longest time. I didn't really do anything about it until probably high school. When you start thinking about college and how you're going to get to where you want to be in life. And I realized it takes a lot of money to learn to fly airplanes unless you go in the military.
So in terms of now, like, knowing you wanted to do that, did that influence your coursework at all? And I'm asking this from an educator's perspective because I'm constantly telling kids all the time, not that we know what we want to be when we grow up. Now, in your case, you did. And I think you kind of proved to a degree what I share with the kids. And the earlier in life that you can make that determination, usually, it's been my experience, the more successful people are because they can kind of like chart their course. They can plot their course. So did you now, as you're in high school, whatever, now say, okay, I have to take this, if I want to one day be a pilot? Do I have to take extra math? Do I have to take extra algebra? Did I have to take algebra?
Yeah.
Did you kind of make those decisions based on what you wanted to be?
Well, kind of. I went to, not to disparage my good old high school in California, but public high school in California you didn't really have, in my neighborhood, there weren't a lot of extra courses you could take. So I did take all the math and science I could take in high school, knowing that when I got to college, I would need, the way the Air Force was then, you had to have some kind of technical degree to go to pilot training.
Right. So
I knew that I was going to have to do something along those lines.
So, I'm saying like just blown away. So you took the math courses, and now because my original intent was at some point I was going to fly and be a pilot. So I called up the recruiter. I was going to go in. And they said, we went through the eye test and everything. They said, well, you won't be able to fly because of your vision. Because of it. So I said, well, if that's the case, then I'm not coming in. And then ultimately I did go in and I took the ASVAB and the tests and everything and really kind of like blew it away. And they said, well, you have a choice of any MOS you want, any occupation you want. And I said, so the recruiter's going down the list. She's figuring, okay, if you did that well, you would probably do well in office, this, that, and the other. And she kept going. She got to the last one, which was jet engine mechanics. She says, I don't think you would want this one. And I said, well, what is it? She said, jet engine. I said, will it put me around the aircraft? And she says, yes. I said, that's the one. So when I went in, that's when I went in to do the jet engine mechanic. And as I was sharing with you before we went on the air, I had the F-4 Phantoms. And I absolutely love it. To this day, when people ask me what was the experience like of being out on the flight line, working with the pilots and so forth, it's hard for me to put it into words to capture the feeling. So now you have now decided to go in the Air Force. You've taken the courses or what have you. And now you go in and you let them know you want to be a pilot. What was that reaction like for the Air Force?
It was okay. The thing was, this is now a 1984 when I'm trying to get to go to pilot training.
Right.
And unfortunately, women were still very limited in what we could fly because there was that combat exclusion in law that you couldn't fly any combat-related missions.
Correct.
So all the women in ROTC had to meet a central selection board. We couldn't just get our pilot slot from our detachment like the guys did. So I went and met the central selection board. There was, I think, 350 women, and they gave out 6 pilot slots and 11 navigator slots.
Wow. Out of 356, so that's like about 17 out of, close to 400.
Yeah.
But see,
so I got a navigator slot, which at the time, when I first heard that, I wasn't very excited about it because it wasn't what I wanted to do. But then I looked at the numbers and said, oh, well, I guess that was actually pretty lucky of me. So I will still be, like you, I'll be in an airplane. I'm not going to be sitting in an office somewhere. And I'll just have to I'll do that for now, and I'll find another way to be a pilot.
Yeah, so, but even like I remember when we used to have it was the pilot, the co-pilot, and the flight engineer.
Yep.
The navigator similar to the flight engineer? The navigator you didn't go up, you just navigated on the ground? No,
we were in the airplane. So in my particular case, when I finished training, I was in what was called the EC-135. It's very similar to same airframe as a KC-135, but it's used as a command post.
Right.
So you had the 2 pilot seats, right? The aircraft commander and the co-pilot, and then behind them you had this table sitting basically sideways in the airplane,
right,
with a bunch of equipment. At this point, we didn't have GPS, so we would actually use what was called a Doppler navigation system.
Correct.
And stars and the sun to.
Right. No, that's absolutely right. It's funny you would mention that because there are times, as I said earlier, I fly on the flight sim. Every now and again, I'll come on a model of aircraft that doesn't have a GPS, and I'm like, how did the pilots find out where they were going? how did they know where they?
Yeah, there's also a bunch of radio-based nav aids you would use, but that wouldn't work if you were over the ocean or, in some other kind of situation where we had to turn those off.
Absolutely. So, in terms of, and we were talking about this on, off before we got on the air, and I've read several of female pilot stories. And as a matter of fact, how I wound up getting in touch with Tammy was because I had read another Tammy story, Tammy Jo Schultz.
Oh, yeah.
And when I read Tammy Jo Schultz's book, Nerves of Steel, there were different women that she had listed in there who were women pilots. So I now started looking up these names, and I don't know if Tammy was the same one she was talking about or not, but it was a very similar name. And it turns out that connected me to Tammy with Athena's voice, so forth and so on. But as I read the books, as a matter of fact, right now I'm reading Jet Girl. I'm reading hers. Was it Caroline Johnson? I think that's her. But as I read your stories in terms of the treatment that you got from the males, I mean, and I know it was like a male-dominated industry, and I know power doesn't like to give up power, so forth and so on. And again, this is why I'm doing these shows in Women's History Month, is to help folks understand the role that women play and have played and can play when we're not playing around with this gender thing, with this issue thing. So what were the men, and maybe since it was like around 1984, maybe it was a little better, but I doubt it.
Well, yeah, in navigator training, it was fine. We didn't have any issues. Even in pilot training, it was pretty good. There was not that many women. There's still, in aviation in general, women make up about 5% of pilots in the U.S., so it's pretty low number still in 2020. But yeah, when the whole announcement came that they were going to let women fly fighters, and I got selected, I was just super excited. I was amazed at the opportunity I was being given, but I truly didn't have any idea what I was getting myself into. I didn't understand fighter pilot culture. I didn't understand that I would be seen as a threat to by some people to what they thought their way of life was, and so yeah, we definitely had some issues along the way. There was times that it was a little tougher than it should have been for me. But there was also a lot of people who were very, very supportive. And that's what really got me through.
Right. So as you, at any point, I mean, because listening audience, you all have no clue how rigorous fighter pilot training is, because they have to prepare for survival. They have to prepare if they get shot down. They have to prepare for so many different things, more than just the flying of the plane. At any point in your training, did you say, you know what am I doing out here? This is just not worth it.
No, I never said that. I actually never said it wasn't worth it. There was a few times when I wondered if I was going to make it through my initial F-16 training. I had just put a ton of pressure on myself, and I had a bunch of pressure from outside as well. There was a lot of scrutiny as to what I was doing. The four-star general in Texas was getting weekly reports on my progress, so he could pass those up the chain. So I really felt for a while like the future of women fighter pilots was riding on my shoulders, and that's not a good place to put yourself.
Well, the thing is, anytime you're the first, that's exactly what folks feel like whenever you're the first. And I was reading in your bio that you were the first.
Yeah, I was. So, so I felt like that. And then if I had a little, problem on a flight, I would just put more pressure on myself for the next flight. And when you do that to yourself, it can snowball. A certain amount of pressure is good for you as far as performance, but if you get too much, your performance will really drop off. So, I struggled for a little bit in one portion of the air-to-air combat training, and I eventually came to the realization that I couldn't worry about all the things I couldn't control. I couldn't worry about the future of women fighter pilots or what people thought of me or what people were saying about me. I was just going to go out and do my best every single day and hope that was good enough. And if it wasn't, and I didn't graduate from F-16 training, then I would leave with my head held high because I would know I'd done the absolute best I could.
I know that's right. And see, that's why I'm going back to your mom even encouraging you at that age to go for being a pilot rather than the flight attendant. Because I was sharing with my students the other day, yesterday as a matter of fact, that when Elizabeth Warren dropped out of the presidential race, she was the last female in there. And either her or somebody, her campaign manager or somebody actually was crying. They were in tears saying the thing that really bothers them the most is now you have young girls, little girls, that's going to have to wait another 4 years to see if a woman can become or will become president. And that struck me because this is going back to the weight is on your shoulders anytime you'll be in the first. And in terms of role modeling, because like I said, I'm AV geek anyway, but the fact that you're female and you have an opportunity to talk to little girls and do the same thing your mom did for you. I just think that's awesome. Do you have the opportunity to talk to young girls or as you go around?
Yes. I've done quite a bit of that throughout my career. I think it's very valuable. I just have to talk to young people in general because although my story is maybe more applicable to women, I think that the things that I learned along the way about handling pressure and focusing on what you can control and not listening to the people who tell you can't do something, that those lessons really apply to everybody. No matter what you do in life or who you are, there's going to be people who tell you shouldn't do that or you can't do that, and whether you listen to them or not will have a big impact on what you do with your life.
Wow, absolutely. Now, I'm looking at you all have some great pictures on your website. Each one of you, as I go under your tabs and I look at your pictures, there's some great shots. I'm looking at the one now with the probably the crew chief or whoever, they're marshaling you out. I can see that one there. You're up in the plane and the crew chief is marshaling out. Great shot. And I just posted that on Facebook letting folks know you're on the air with me. But what is that feeling like to be sitting in like this multi-zillion-dollar piece of equipment?
It's amazing. I was talking to my son yesterday because we were getting ready. I mentioned that I was going to be on the radio in the morning, so I told him, I still remember my very first flight in the F-16. It's you're sitting in the front, but you have an instructor in the back with you, but you do an afterburner takeoff, and you can feel all 5 stages of the afterburner light and kick in. And the very first time you feel that, it's just such a rush.
It has to be. Because, again, as a jet engine mechanic, whenever we would put the engines either on the test mount or if we ran them in the plane itself, just sitting in there, hearing that and feeling it on the ground, not even moving, it was a rush. So I can't imagine those things kicking in as you're going down the flight line or on the runway and it kicking in as you go up into the air. But again, that is just, and again, for listening audience, this aircraft, these various aircraft, they are extremely, extremely expensive. That is a lot of responsibility in a 20-something-year-old hand.
Yes, it is. It is. But you do get quite a bit of training before you get there, a whole year of pilot training, and then you do, I'm not sure what they're calling it now, but at the time it was like a introduction to fighter fundamentals. So then you have additional training in the T-38 that helps you prepare, and then all the academics and the simulators before you get in the actual airplane.
So you actually had the opportunity to fly combat. You flew combat missions.
Yes.
Now,
Yes,
not only are you dealing with, okay, I'm flying a plane, but now I'm trying to make sure I stay alive.
Yeah. It was Northern Watch over Iraq, after Desert Storm, the first war in Iraq.
Oh, I remember that one well. That's when I was in.
Yeah. And it was a relatively quiet time. So yeah, I mean, you have live weapons on your airplane. Got your survival vest. You've got your handgun. You're all prepared for combat. But it was pretty quiet time. So we were more doing air patrols and not. It wasn't.
Well, no, but yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Because you're flying over Iraq and they could actually shoot at you, but
exactly. That's exactly what I was getting ready to say. Like, I hear you when you say quiet time, but you're still, for the most part, you're a target.
Yes, yes, you are.
Yeah, so wow, that's like I said, I just sit here in awe because I couldn't get words of being just around the aircraft, and you're actually in it. Matter of fact, I have an interesting story in terms of. Whenever they first came out with the seatbelt law, I was one of those that were kind of like, why we got to wear these seatbelts? They're so uncomfortable. I don't feel like doing it. But one day I was actually strapping one of the pilots in to the plane. I'd gone up on the ladder and I was helping the pilot get the seatbelt on. And it dawned on, I said, you know what? I'm up here helping somebody else put on a seatbelt and I won't wear one in the car. From that point on, I've worn my seatbelt ever since. After that thought hit me as I was up there assisting the pilot put his seatbelt on. But
yeah, obviously it's a dangerous job.
Yes.
But there is a lot built in to help protect you and a lot of training that goes into it. So I never really, most of the time I didn't really think about that. Once you get going, your brain's so busy trying to accomplish the mission, whatever it is that day,
right,
that you don't have a lot of time to think about all the what ifs.
Right, exactly, because I'm looking here again as we went through the bio. You actually went through an ejection.
I did, yes. Yeah, that was the one time I started thinking about the what ifs. I had an electrical problem that had never happened in the F-16 before, so I didn't. It presented itself as kind of a normal electrical issue with the battery, and I went through all the normal procedures. And then when we came back to land, I had a wingman with me. And my radios weren't working, so we were using the planned procedures and hand signals for when your radios don't work. And I landed on the runway, and I didn't have any brakes. So there's procedures. There's procedures for that. We have 2 channels of brakes. So you try the other channel. You try turning the anti-skid off. You try putting the hook down at the end of the runway because we have a hook and cables. And the hook didn't work. So if I got halfway into what's called the overrun at the end of the runway, and I ejected on the ground.
So whenever you ejected, you actually flew up into the air and then came back down?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the plane was on the ground, so when you ejected, you actually went back up out of the aircraft and came back down on the parachute?
Yes.
Wow, that's and what happened to the plane? The plane just kept going, or
the plane kept going. It basically it was at Luke Air Force Base, and there's a little a dirt berm before the fence, the perimeter fence. So it hit that berm and actually got airborne again a little bit, and it drug a bunch of fence across Northern Avenue and into the farmer's field across the street.
Wow. And I see, I can relate. And now, this is me. It's crazy. Whenever I'm on the simulator, because I'm actually on my computer with Microsoft's Flight Simulator X, what have you, and I'm on the computer, whatever, and if I crash or something, I feel like, this really happened to me. Like, I get an attitude, like, how come I didn't get this down, or what went wrong, or this, and so now, I can't imagine it now happen in reality for real life.
Yeah, so it was pretty surreal, really. I mean, I'd never experienced temporal distortion like that before. I pulled that ejection handle, and it felt like it took forever. For the rocket motor to fire and get me out of that airplane. And it didn't. It took like 1.5 seconds, but it felt like forever. And then, you're going through your procedures. I land. I don't do a very good parachute landing fall. But I'm on the side. I'm now, and 5 minutes ago I was perfectly fine flying my F-16, and now I'm sitting in the dirt next to the runway, wondering what just happened because. Like I said, that emergency had never happened before, so I wasn't expecting my brakes not to work.
Correct.
I wasn't anticipating any of that, and it just is this chain of events that you keep going, well, that didn't work. Well, that didn't work.
Correct.
Okay, well, maybe my hook will work. Nope, that didn't work.
And all that has to be done, all those decisions have to be made in seconds. Like you said, you're not getting half hour to decide. Those decisions have to be made in nanoseconds. And when you're talking about, because most in aircraft, everything for the most part is redundant. There's backup systems. So whenever you start saying something like that fails, and for the listening audience, again, for those of you who are not AV geeks and you don't understand the speed and knots and everything, when those planes come down on the runway, they're going at a pretty good amount of knots. That's what we use in terms of airspeed and knots. And they're going at a pretty, somewhere between 130, 180, 220, somewhere around there. So when they hit the ground and you hit brakes and they don't work, it's going to continue to roll.
Yeah, I was still probably going over 70 miles an hour, which the F-16 has got those little tricycle gears that we're taught from our very first training. If you're departing a prepared surface at greater than taxi speed, get out.
Right.
That's what they teach us when we first start, because that airplane's going to flip. It could catch fire. You're going to be stuck in there. It was exactly what I was trained to do. I did exactly what I was trained to do.
Absolutely.
That didn't make me any less angry when I was sitting in the dirt going, what just happened?
Right. But that's an interesting point you just brought up about training, because the training prepares you to be able to do it intuitively. In other words, you don't even have to think about it because you've been trained on it so much, you've practiced it so much that you just intuitively know what to do when a situation arises. That's the way the military is in general. Because, again, I always share this story about being in basic training when I just did not understand why we had to fold our underwear and socks in 6-inch squares. But it dawned on me after training in terms of the chaos. And I said they were creating chaos because in the event of war, we would have to be able to perform instinctively and intuitively. And you'd have to be able to do it because they would play all kinds of tricks on us. One TI, one drill sergeant would throw his voice when we were marching, the flight was marching down to see if the other flight responded, all kinds of madness. And again, like in war, it would be such chaos. You have to be able to figure out, where am I? What am I doing? Whose side am I on? Who's doing what? Is it a trick? Is it real? And these decisions have to be made instantaneously. It's the same thing in the aircraft. The decisions have to be made instantaneously because you don't have a lot of time whenever you're dealing with speed and aircraft. So the training is, as much as you may not wonder, like, what is going on in this training? Why do we have to do that? If the time comes, as you just heard Sharon say, you know what to do almost automatically.
Yeah, and definitely in aviation, in every airplane I've ever flown, they have some kind of what they call boldface or memory items or something where you have this memorized sequence of things to do in the event of a particular emergency. And we're trained pretty well on those throughout from the very beginning of our flying careers. So it's just, there was no question in my mind what I was supposed to do, and I just did it.
Now, the F-16, that was the first fighter that was a fly-by-wire. You actually was almost kind of like had a joystick.
Yes, yeah.
What was that? Because, again, those were, I remember when the F-16s came out. As a matter of fact, I was in high school, and one of the first models of airplanes, and I still have it to this day, was the prototype, the one that was painted in the American colors, red, white, and blue. I had that Revell model, and I built it, and I still have that model to this day in my office. That model is probably 30-some years old, but I built that as a teenager and still have it. And I remember the big hoopla over it being fly-by-wire.
Yes. So they actually had to modify initially when they put the stick in the F-16 that it didn't move at all. It would just go off the pressure of you moving your hand.
Right.
But it didn't actually move. Well, they changed it so it would move a little bit because it was just felt so unnatural for the pilot.
I guess so, because you don't know if it's doing anything or not.
Yeah.
Other than what the plane is stopped to do once you.
Exactly.
Wow. But yeah, that's the 16. That is, like I said, I remember this was going back into the whole, when the movie Top Gun came out. That's still my favorite movie to this day. When Tom Cruise and all those Val Kilmer and all of them, I love Top Gun. I could just sit there and watch that over and over again. But that was during that time frame. And is it like, because really Top Gun, really glamorized the whole aviation and the military and the flight. Is it like that?
Well, no. I mean, I don't think that life is ever really like you see it in the movie.
Exactly.
It's a ton of hard work.
Right.
You make friends. I have friends that are like family to me from my first assignment in Germany in the F-16. The camaraderie in the squadron is amazing, and just the opportunities to do the things you do flying an F-16. It's like nothing else.
Oh, I'm sure, because it's, as I said, as I read these. Go ahead.
Well, we did. But it's still not like Top Gun,
right? No, because as I read the various, biographies and autobiographies of those of you who do that, ultimately, somewhere in the book, the line always comes up: "Can you believe we get to do this? Can you believe we get paid for this? Can you believe we get?" And usually it's as you're 30,000 feet or 25,000 feet above, and you can see a sunrise, or you see the clouds, or you see a city, or whatever. Like ultimately, the line always comes out: "Can you believe I get a chance to do that?" That's the same feeling I had on the ground as a mechanic. So, it's kind of like, is that like as you're doing this, like, I can't believe I'm doing this?
Yes. Yeah, sometimes. When you have time to sit back and relax.
Right.
It's not quite so much in the F-16 because we were always, training time was valuable and missions were very full. But there was one time I was flying back from, we'd come from Germany to Nellis for Red Flag, and we were flying our airplanes back across the ocean. And it was when Hale-Bopp, the comet, was out there. And basically, we're just, like I said, 30,000 feet over the ocean following a comet. It was pretty cool.
Oh, wow.
Didn't think about that. Yeah.
That's an experience as well. And I had the opportunity, because you were talking about the KC-135 a little bit earlier. I had the opportunity to go up in the KC-135 and actually lay down in the boomer area because we were refueling. Matter of fact, we were refueling F-16s out over the Atlantic, down over Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
We went down there and I had that experience, and that was a sight. The view was just like unreal. And it was on that same flight I had a chance to go up into the flight deck. And I always tell people, I said, the view from the flight deck from the front is totally different from if you're a passenger looking out the side windows.
Oh, yeah, definitely. While flying with Southwest, we always get, a lot of kids on the airplane, and we're always trying to get them up front to see what's going on when we're on the ground.
Right.
And I tell them it's the best seat in the house.
No, it really is. Because when I sat in the jump seat and I said, wow, this is the view from where the pilots sit. But it is, like the view in the back of the plane as you're looking out as a passenger, because I always take a window seat. As a passenger, it is limited compared to that front windshield view. And I was like, yeah. God, this is awesome. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit in terms of moving from an F-16 to the Boeing 737. Was that a hard transition? Because a lot of time pilots are like, that's going from a race car, sports car, to like a station wagon, or I guess in these days, minivan.
Yeah, it's definitely a different kind of flying. Flying is flying, basically. But
right.
In F-16, getting from one place to the other was the simplest thing you ever did in the F-16.
Right.
Because everything else is, complicated. You're trying to plan a mission to practice dropping bombs or air-to-air combat or those kind of things, and it's very busy. Whereas now my job really is getting just from one place to the other. So it's different in that it's a bigger airplane, it's heavier, it doesn't perform the same way, all those things.
Right.
But it's still flying. So the basics are basics, and we get training when you get to the company and simulators and all the same things we've done all our lives when we changed airplanes. So I really appreciate it now. It's a different time of life, Right. I spent 20 years in the military, and I was ready to have a little more control over where I went and what I did.
Absolutely.
I didn't. The pace of operations is still
right
incredibly fast in the military. People are deployed a lot. They're with their families a lot. And my son was not quite 5 when I retired, so it was a good time to have a little more control over my own life and I'm thankful for the opportunity to still be flying. It's one of those things where it's a great job.
Absolutely.
It's something you enjoy.
Right. I'll ask you one of the questions because I had, I had a pilot friend I was telling you about earlier came and spoke with my students at the school. And when I tell you, Sharon, I was worse than the kids. Because he came in full regalia. He came in his captain's suit, the hat, the whole nine. And so one of the questions the kids asked, do you ever get bored? Do you ever get bored sitting up there doing that?
No. Well, I won't say no, never. But then you just have to look around and appreciate where you are.
Right.
Sometimes you've done it so much, you can occasionally take it for granted.
Right.
And then you'll be up and see the most amazing stars you've ever seen. Or, I was airborne for the solar eclipse. That's a pretty cool thing.
Right.
There's just so many other things that you should appreciate, that it's not, bored isn't the right word.
No, absolutely
you're not real
right.
Up at altitude, but, look around and take advantage of the opportunity you're given.
No, I could not agree with you more. And again, I probably share this about every week, and for regular listeners, this is old hat for them, but my day job is an educator, and I'm principal of a school. And there are days whenever I would pull into the parking lot and just look up at the building and say, wow, I can't believe that I am responsible for this, that everything that goes on in this building at some point, one way or the other, is my responsibility. And I always ask pilots in terms of, especially like whenever you now get into your 737, 747s, DC-10s or whatever, do you ever walk out to that and just be in awe of the fact that, I'm the one that's going to be in charge of this?
I will tell you, probably not often enough. Like I said, we tend to kind of take the things you have every day for granted sometimes. Right. But I do appreciate it, and it comes, I get it when I have we have passengers sometimes who are nervous. Right. They don't like flying. It's not something they're comfortable with, and occasionally they'll come up and want to talk to us, and that's when I kind of really appreciate that the trust people put in you.
Correct.
When they board your airplane and the responsibility that you have to them. It's not that we don't think of that every day, but realistically, I think pilots, most of the ones I know, we want to keep ourselves alive as much as
absolutely
as anybody else, right?
That's right.
We're going to do the right things because we're right there with you. But it's important to remember the trust people put in us and the responsibility we have to our passengers as well as to ourselves.
Correct. Do you ever have a situation, because especially with this being Women's History Month and knowing the journey of females in aviation, do you ever have a situation now with the 737 or any of the passenger planes where a passenger comes in and feels uncomfortable because a woman is a pilot?
Yes, definitely. That still happens.
That's crazy.
Yeah, well, there's one time in particular where it was I was still a first officer, but my captain was a woman as well. And there's a passenger boarding, and I was coming back from taking a walk, and she was going out to take a walk, so we happened to see both of us together. And he's like, "Wait a minute, there's two women flying the airplane?" I'm like, "Yes, sir." "Well, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that." I'm like, "Really?" He says, "Yeah." And I said, "Well," I said, "Sir, if you want to wait for the next flight to San Jose, you're welcome to, because I'm pretty sure there won't be two women flying that one." Because it happens.
It's absolutely
I've been
crazy.
at Southwest 13 years, and it's probably been 20 times, that I've had both women pilots. So I'm like, you can take the next one. I'm pretty sure you won't have two women pilots on that one. He got on the airplane and went with us.
Exactly. It was absolute madness. It's just crazy. It really is. I hate to laugh, but that's just crazy. And I know you get that because I've had the same experience. Like the particular pilot that we had, he's African American. So I asked him a similar question. Do you ever get a situation where somebody says, "Oh, no, I'm not flying that if you're flying it"? And he told me the same thing. Yes. And not only from Caucasian people, from African Americans as well.
Exactly.
So I said, wow, okay. But again, all that to me is crazy because the plane doesn't know the difference in terms of gender or race or anything else. The plane just knows whoever's giving it the commands.
And that's truly how women came to be accepted in the fighter community it's a performance-based industry.
Right.
If you can fly the airplane and they can trust you, you're going to be okay.
Absolutely.
And this is something I try to tell people when we talk about our experience and, some of the things that we put up with along the way. And I said, no matter what you do, there's going to be those people.
Right.
You say you want to be a stay-at-home mom, and somebody's going to tell you shouldn't do that.
Right.
But it doesn't. So don't listen to those people. They're always going to be there. But find the people. I talk about find your people. Find the people that support you. Find the people that care about you.
Right.
And then listen to their opinions. But don't listen to some stranger's opinion. Who cares?
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. But I know, again, as I said, whenever we were talking offline, first off, I know men can be cruel in terms of, like I said, if it's a territory where they feel like you said, they're losing ground on or what have you. It's like, well, what are the women doing here? Because it's like that in many industries that were male dominated. And so, that's why that's why where the question came from just now about when folks are even boarding the plane, do you get some passengers that may have that crazy jacked up attitude? And apparently, yes. It's funny you were talking about, sitting in the back of the plane. I get a kick when I fly knowing what all the sounds are, whether it's the air brakes or the speed brakes, speed brakes or the ailerons or the flaps or the landing gear coming down, but they make noises. Someone who is like squeamish or afraid of flight, I can see the expressions on their faces when those noises are being made, and I have to kind of get a chuckle. And every now and again I say, don't worry, that's normal. That's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Like those clunks and bangs, we're supposed to happen to that.
Yeah.
So in terms of, and this is kind of similar to the question I just asked of walking up to something that large. When you're up in the flight deck, do you think about everything that's behind you in terms of like the size of, like, you're up in the flight deck and that little the front part of the plane, but behind you is this massive machine. Does that ever like come across your mind as because I'm always like, it's like you're sitting there and you have like all these rows of seats back there, you have the wings, you have does that ever, like, all this behind me, does that ever come to your mind?
Not especially. The only time I ever really think about it is, we have a few different versions of the 737 at Southwest, and the 800 is a little longer.
Okay.
So it actually has, if you don't fly it properly, you have the potential of what's called a tail strike.
Right.
Which means you could, if you over-rotate too quickly on takeoff, or if you flare too much on landing, you can actually strike the tail of the airplane on the ground. So I think about it when I'm flying an 800 a little more, but it's just I just remind myself on takeoff and landing, okay, 800, so just make sure you fly it the way you should. It's not really any different. There's just a little more potential for damage if you don't do things properly.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of, like, for me, not having done it I have flown a Cessna. I have flown in reality, but for being on the flight sim all the time, even though I take off really well, I fly but when it comes to landing, I always get like butterflies. Even though I can land, I know how to land. But is that the same way for you or for pilots in reality? Do you like come to landing or any part in the flight where there's always kind of like nerve-wracking, or just kind of this is it? Because to me, it's like takeoff and landing is the real work there. But do you get like landing any jitters or butterflies? Like, because for me, it's like every flight, no matter, and I know how to land, but I still get those butterflies. So that's just a normal part of the job. The landing is just a normal part of the job. Okay, there you go. Yeah,
takeoff and landing is obviously what we call the higher threat part of the flight, right? It's when the thing that could go wrong. That's probably when it's going to happen. But when the weather is challenging,
right?
I don't get jitters or nervous or butterflies. I just it's more challenging. Right? It's more harder when you have a really strong crosswind and a wet runway or snow on the runway. And, you just have to focus more and be more precise than maybe you would if it's a bright sunny day in Denver with a 12,000 foot long runway.
Correct.
But I don't know. I guess we've just been doing it so long.
Right.
I don't really think about it. I just focus on doing my job, and getting the plane safely on the ground and then getting it to the gate.
I know that's right. Well, like I said, I'm always in awe of the process, and I know the Bernoulli's theorem. I know how planes fly. I know the going across the top of the wing, the lift. I know all that, but I'm still amazed at the whole process. Now, was your mom alive long enough to see you realize the dream of becoming a pilot?
Yes. Yeah, so yeah, she's still
outstanding.
Yeah.
So did you ever have that conversation with her? Like, Mom, remember when I was 4, you told me to be the pilot?
Yeah, I've talked to her about it. Yeah, and she was always very much for both my sister and I that we should do what we want to do,
right?
Not be bound by societal norms necessarily, and we should do what we want and not listen to those people who tell you no.
Absolutely. We're coming down to the last part of the interview. I want to talk a little bit about Athena's voice and what you all do. But as I was sharing with you on the telephone, listening audience, like I said, it's like the quintessential AV geek. So I have Microsoft Flight Simulator and a couple other simulators at home. And so I was determined I was going to get my plane down on the aircraft carrier. And the particular plane they give us was the FA-18. And so just now when you were talking about flaring and all that, on that aircraft carrier, you cannot flare.
Oh, no.
It's like I finally got that thing down on the deck. And Sharon, you'd have thought I really did it in real life. I was jumping around and yes, I got it down because I was like either too high, too low, didn't catch the ball, didn't catch the hook, had to go back up. I mean, it was just so when it finally caught the hook, I didn't know what to do with myself. And but I said that's no joke. That aircraft carrier is no joke, even on the sim. So Athena's voice, talk to me a little bit about all of you got together because for the next few weeks, just like when I had Tammy a few weeks ago, my guests will be affiliated with Athena's voice. How did you all come together and what do you all do, so forth and so on?
Yeah, so we have a pretty good women fighter pilot network now with Facebook and all the social media. So we do a better job of supporting each other than maybe when I was starting out, and I'm pretty much the only one. And so Athena's Voice USA, we call it the Wisdom of Women Warriors. So we've got a group of us who like to go out and share our stories and our ideas on leadership, our ideas on how to get to the point where you can, live your dream, essentially. So it's a speakers bureau that we started all together, and really the purpose of it for most of us is because we want to encourage others. We want to help people be able to do what they want to do and find their strength and find their courage to make their life the life they want it to be.
Well, I'll tell you what, you were just talking about leader. And again, for me, I know this, and listening audience, I hope you know it as well. I don't think you can understand how much flying a fighter jet, or a plane for that matter, the principles are the same thing in terms of leadership. The same skills that you would apply to fly a fighter jet or do a mission or whatever are transferable to leading a business or a company. Matter of fact, right now I'm reading a book by a Navy SEAL who has now transferred his Navy SEAL skills into leadership. And so they go hand in hand. So in terms of talking to folks or consulting or counseling folks, I couldn't think of better folks to do that than folks who have that military type training, fighter jet training, Navy SEAL training, or what have you, because you do have to lead in these situations that we're in. So you're saying that Athena's Voice is a network of women fighter pilots that go around and do just that.
Yeah, we take some of the challenges accomplished, and we share our stories in a way that encourages others.
I tell you what, you all encourage me. I can tell you that right off the bat. But again, I thank you because, again, right now it's 7:56 or so, 7:57 or so here. So that means it's about, I guess now 5:57 there.
Yeah, it's almost 6 o'clock, yeah.
Almost 6 o'clock. Okay, well, again, I thank you so much, Rod. I have thoroughly enjoyed the interview. I will have it up on my YouTube channel in the archives. I will send you the link as well, and you can share it and do whatever you'd like with it. It'll be an MP3 link as well as a YouTube link. So it'll be two links. There'll be the YouTube channel link, and then there's an MP3 that it's a recording of the of the interview. So at this point, what I usually do is I turn the mic off and let my guests promote anything they like to promote in terms of websites. If you want to promote Athena's Voice or anything else you got going on, if you have your own business or whatever, or anything that you want to promote, I turn the mic off with the exception of a dollar amount. I turn the mic off and the mic is yours for the next couple of minutes. So I'm going to do that just now, and then we'll wrap up. And I thank you for a great interview.
Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. It's been fun. I would just like to say that Athena's Voice USA is a speakers bureau, like we said, of women warriors. I think we have a very special and unique perspective from our experiences. That it takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to do what we've done. And that I think it's a great opportunity for us to share with others and help them become better leaders, stronger, braver people to do the things they want to do in their lives.
All right. Well, that is well said. The group is Athena's, ATHENA''S Voice, VOICE. And again, they're available to come into your company or your school or whatever. And again, talk about leadership and everything that they've gone through in terms of becoming what they've become and their experiences. Well, again, Sharon, thank you so much. I wish you nothing but the best for you and your family and everyone, and happy, safe travels. And because you were at Southwest, you said, right?
Yes.
So do you and Tammy Jo Schultz's paths cross, or do you know each other?
I do not know her.
Oh, because she's with Southwest as well.
Yes, she is. She's an amazing woman.
Okay, wow. All right. Well, again, I cannot thank you enough. Had a wonderful time. The hour seemed like it blew by so quickly.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you as well. Take care.
You too.
All right. Bye now.
Bye now.
All right. So needless to say, I do not have to try to tell you how excited I was having a chance to talk to Sharon. And then in the coming weeks, I have more female pilots as well. And it just happened to work that way for Women's History Month, because as we go forward, I'll have females in other careers as well. But for me, I just get excited whether it's male or female when it comes to airplanes. I just love airplanes and aviation and flying and the whole, thing that goes with it. So I really do get excited whenever I talk to folks who do that, knowing how it really works, because I do it on the computer, and I have done it once in a Cessna. But people that do that every day, like I get excited talking to them. So that's another edition or another episode of the Reading Circle with your host, Marc Medley.